The Galactic Empire ruled through dominance, its power spanning countless star systems, where species bowed before its might. Humanity, though a minor presence in the grand scale of the empire, had proven irritatingly resistant to full subjugation. Their forces had been scattered after Earth fell, yet their defiance never fully extinguished. To the empire, they were an inconvenience, primitive, undisciplined, and easily crushed when necessary. On the occupied planet of Vortalis Prime, a human girl sat in the cold confines of an Imperial holding cell. She had been captured during a recent operation in the lower districts, where insurgent activity had been rising. No identification, no records, nothing to indicate she was anyone of importance. Just a faceless human, another remnant of a defeated species. The Empire's officers barely paid her any attention. To them, she was nothing, a stray caught in the crossfire, perhaps a scavenger or the daughter of some disgraced rebel. The guards, towering reptilian Bractyl warriors, sneered down at her from outside the energy barrier of her cell. The girl did not speak, did not beg, did not acknowledge them at all. She simply sat, hood pulled low over her face, hands resting on her lap. Commander Vorlex, the officer overseeing planetary security, found the situation amusing. He stood outside the cell, flanked by two of his subordinates, his sharp avian features twisted in a smirk. Look at her. Not even struggling. Perhaps she's already broken. He turned to one of his men, a heavy-set officer with dull gray skin. Do we even need to interrogate this one? She looks like she's given up already. The gray-skinned officer chuckled. Barely worth the effort, sir. We'll run her through the usual process. If she knows anything, she'll talk. If not, well, there are always other uses for human prisoners. Vorlex sighed, shaking his head. Humans. You'd think after their world burned, they would have learned their place. Yet here they are, still clawing at the walls of inevitability. I suppose I should at least commend their stubbornness. He leaned forward, his talons clicking against the control panel beside the cell. Do you understand me, girl? Do you even have the sense to know what's happening to you? The girl did not move. Vorlex frowned. Nothing. Not even a flinch. Perhaps you truly are defective. He exhaled through his nostrils, growing bored. Fine. Prep her for transfer. We'll send her to central processing. If she's of any use, they'll determine it there. The guards deactivated the energy field, stepping inside to seize the girl's arms. She did not resist, allowing them to pull her to her feet and drag her forward. Her head remained tilted downward, concealing her face. Outside the prison complex, a storm brewed over the city. The neon skyline of Vortalis Prime flickered through the heavy rain, the towering spires of Imperial authority casting long, oppressive shadows over the streets below. For most of the planet's residents, whether human or alien, resistance was a death sentence. Any who dared challenge the Empire found themselves hunted down and executed, their remains displayed as warnings to others. The Empire's control was absolute, or so they believed. Beyond the towering security checkpoints and heavily patrolled districts, in the dark underbelly of the city, a different kind of force had been set into motion, unseen, unheard, and operating far beyond the Empire's ability to detect them. A small team of men moved through the rain, navigating the tight alleys and derelict structures that the Empire's security forces rarely bothered to patrol. Their presence was a ghost in the machine. No digital signatures, no transmissions, no traceable movement. They operated in the spaces between Imperial oversight and the cracks that arrogant rulers had deemed insignificant. Daniels led the team, his cold blue eyes scanning every possible approach. He had served in too many war zones to ever let his guard down, even in the dead of night. Beside him, Cooper carried his rifle at a low ready, his every movement fluid and silent. Behind them, Rodriguez and Miller followed in tight formation, their faces expressionless beneath their helmets. Each man had a history etched in battle, their past spanning every theater of war humanity had fought before the fall of Earth. They were ghosts, the last remnants of a force that had once struck fear into even the strongest adversaries. And now, they were here for one reason. Daniels held up a fist, stopping the team in their tracks. Without a word, he tapped a small device on his wrist, bringing up a holographic display. A series of intercepted Imperial transmissions scrolled across the screen, detailing prisoner movements within the sector. They had her. Daniels exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. He turned to his men. They're moving her to central processing. Cooper didn't need to ask what that meant. We don't have time to wait. Rodriguez nodded. Then we go now. There was no hesitation. No need for further discussion. Each man knew what was at stake. They moved. Through the rain, through the shadows, through the forgotten places of the Empire's sprawling domain. The girls' captors had no idea what was coming for them. But they would. The city of Ortalis Prime stretched like a monolithic beast beneath the storm, its skyline punctuated by towering spires of Imperial rule. Between those gleaming structures lay the Undercity, a labyrinth of forgotten alleys, rusted walkways, and the remnants of civilizations ground beneath the Empire's heel. It was here, in the darkness between the neon-lit streets, that the squad moved. Daniels led the team with practiced efficiency, his every step calculated. Behind him, Cooper adjusted the scope on his rifle, eyes flicking between shadowed corners and open rooftops. Rodriguez and Miller covered their flanks, silent and watchful. They had been in cities like this before, occupied zones where every alley could hide an enemy. Every rooftop could be a sniper's perch. The Empire thought its dominion was absolute, but the squad knew better. Any system could be broken. Any fortress could fall. Daniels checked his wrist display again, the intercepted Imperial transmissions scrolling in precise lines of alien script. The prisoner transfer was scheduled to move within the hour. The girl was being held in a fortified transport facility near the Eastern Security Quadrant. Once she was inside the transfer vehicle, extraction would become exponentially more difficult. They needed to move now. The squad approached the perimeter of the facility, a looming structure of dark metal reinforced with energy shielding. Automated turrets tracked the streets below, their targeting systems sweeping for unauthorized movement. Imperial patrols moved in predictable patterns, their routines established through complacency. The Empire relied on overwhelming force, not adaptability. That was their weakness. Daniels gave a silent hand signal. Cooper peeled off toward a high vantage point, disappearing into the shadows of a derelict building. Rodriguez and Miller followed Daniels along the outer edge of the facility, keeping to blind spots in the patrols. Every movement was precise, every action deliberate. The squad didn't need to speak. They had worked together long enough that words were unnecessary. A quiet click in Daniels' earpiece signaled that Cooper was in position. High above the streets, the sniper adjusted his sights, calibrating for wind, elevation, and the ever-present glow of the city's artificial lights. He scanned the facility, identifying weak points, unguarded vents, exposed power lines, security blind spots. Daniels activated a small device on his wrist, bringing up a map of the building's internal layout. The Empire, for all its arrogance, had not yet realized that their encrypted data was not as impenetrable as they believed. The squad had spent months deciphering Imperial security systems, identifying vulnerabilities and cataloging structural weaknesses. Every detail mattered. Every advantage was exploited. Rodriguez knelt by a maintenance panel near the facility's base, producing a compact tool from his gear. With practiced precision, he bypassed the outdated security locks, feeding a looped surveillance feed into the system. To the Imperial guards watching the monitors, the exterior would appear undisturbed. In reality, the squad had already slipped past their first layer of defense. Inside the facility, the girl remained seated in her cell, her posture unchanged. She had not spoken since her capture, nor had she shown any reaction to her situation. The guards had long since stopped paying attention to her. To them, she was already forgotten. That would be their mistake. Daniels motioned forward. The squad moved. They advanced through the facility's outer corridors, bypassing checkpoints with calculated ease. Cooper provided overwatch from his perch, his rifle tracking enemy movements. The Empire's reliance on automated security worked against them. Once a system was compromised, its operators became blind to the true threat. Miller reached a junction ahead, holding up a fist. The squad stopped. Daniels glanced at his display. 2 guards approaching, their armored boots echoing against the metal floor. He gave a quick signal. Rodriguez moved first, pressing against the wall as the patrol passed. A swift motion, a silent blade, and the first guard collapsed without a sound. Miller caught the second, muffling the alien's final breath before lowering the body to the floor. The squad moved the corpses into a darkened alcove, ensuring no immediate signs of disturbance. Cooper's voice crackled softly in their earpieces. "Transport team is mobilizing. You have less than 10 minutes." Daniels acknowledged the update, signaling the squad to pick up the pace. They reached the detention block, bypassing another layer of security with Rodriguez's precise handiwork. The cell doors released with a quiet hiss. The girl stood. She did not hesitate, did not need to be told what was happening. She stepped forward, her hood still drawn low over her face. Daniels didn't ask if she was ready. She had been waiting for this moment. The squad fell into formation around her, adapting their defensive perimeter to accommodate her presence. Their movements remained fluid, their objective unchanged. The escape was already in motion. They retraced their steps, navigating the facility with the same silent efficiency. Cooper provided real-time updates, marking enemy movements and potential obstacles. The squad adjusted accordingly, slipping through the cracks of Imperial security. Then an alert sounded. Somewhere in the facility, an officer had noticed the irregularities. The false security feeds, the missing guards, the minor discrepancies that, when combined, spelled one undeniable conclusion: an intrusion. Imperial response teams mobilized. Daniels barely had time to signal the team before the first squad of enemy soldiers rounded the corner. Cooper's rifle cracked. The lead Imperial fell before he had a chance to react, his helmet shattering under the force of the round. The remaining soldiers hesitated, just long enough for Rodriguez and Miller to eliminate them with swift, controlled bursts of suppressed fire. The squad kept moving. Outside, the storm raged, lightning reflecting off the sleek black hull of the waiting transport vehicle. Imperial reinforcements were closing in, their boots striking the pavement in rhythmic urgency. Daniels pressed a command into his wrist display. A distant explosion rocked the sector. The Empire had grown too comfortable, too reliant on its own superiority. The squad had spent weeks planting explosives at key infrastructure points throughout the city. The moment Imperial forces diverted their attention, the squad took advantage. The way was clear. They emerged from the facility's lower exits, slipping into the transport, just as the alarms blared in full force. The Empire had finally realized something was wrong. Too late. As the vehicle accelerated into the storm, the girl finally spoke. "Proceed." The squad obeyed. The operation was far from over. The rain hammered against the armored transport as it sped through the neon-lit streets, weaving through back alleys and abandoned sectors where Imperial patrols were scarce. Daniel sat across from the girl, his rifle resting on his knee, watching her with measured intent. She hadn't removed her hood, and her posture remained as still as it had been in the cell. There was no panic, no hesitation, just silence. The others didn't ask questions. They moved as they always did, focused, methodical, ready. The mission dictated their actions, and for now, she was the mission. Cooper's voice came through the earpiece. His tone clipped. Imperial net just lit up. They're tracking the explosion. No mention of the extraction yet, but that won't last. Rodriguez adjusted the controls from the front of the vehicle, rerouting their course through the city's industrial sectors. The Empire's response would be swift, but they knew the underbelly of Vortalis Prime better than the soldiers, patrolling its pristine avenues. There were places the Empire did not go, sectors written off as lawless zones, too insignificant to fully police. That was where they were heading. Miller checked his weapon, breaking the silence. That explosion's gonna buy us minutes, not hours. If we don't get underground before they retask their drones, we're exposed. Daniels nodded. We'll make it. The girl finally spoke, her voice low but firm. You don't need to adjust your plan for me. It was the first time any of them had heard her speak. The words weren't those of a prisoner rescued from captivity. They carried the weight of authority, the tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Daniels studied her for a beat before replying. We weren't planning to. She said nothing else. The transport continued through the rain-soaked streets, slipping through the cracks of Imperial surveillance. The squad worked in quiet efficiency, each man monitoring their sector of responsibility. The vehicle's stolen credentials held for now, keeping automated security from flagging their route. Rodriguez broke the silence next. Safe house is 3 clicks ahead. Once we're in, we wait for the signal. Daniels checked his wrist display, scanning the network traffic. The Imperials were still focused on the explosion, but security checkpoints were being reinforced across the district. The Empire wasn't blind. They knew something had slipped through the cracks. It was only a matter of time before they connected the dots. The vehicle reached the edge of the industrial district, slipping into the shadow of towering refineries and processing plants. The air was thick with the scent of burning fuel, the distant glow of molten metal casting eerie shadows across the rain-soaked pavement. The safe house was buried within the remains of an abandoned foundry, a relic from before the Empire had tightened its grip on Vortalis Prime. It had once been a hub of industry, but now it was little more than rusted steel and forgotten machinery, perfect for disappearing. Rodriguez brought the transport to a stop inside a cavernous loading bay. The moment the engine shut down, the squad moved. Daniels stepped out first, scanning the perimeter before signaling the others to follow. The girl exited without hesitation, moving with the same unshaken composure she had held since her extraction. Cooper took position near the entrance, his rifle trained on the street beyond. We won't have long. They'll start running patrols through this sector soon. Daniels nodded. We hold here until we get confirmation from command. Rodriguez locked down the vehicle, wiping any traceable data from its onboard systems. Miller checked their supplies, ensuring their munitions and gear were intact. Every action was routine, drilled into them from years of operations like this. The girl finally pulled back her hood, revealing a face marked by scars, not of wounds left untreated, but of a life forged in violence. Her dark eyes studied the squad with the same calculating intensity they had given her. You're not Imperial defectors. Daniels met her gaze. No. She considered that for a moment, then turned to survey the safe house. How long has your unit been active? Rodriguez smirked. That depends. Officially, we don't exist. Her expression remained neutral. And unofficially, Miller leaned against a rusted support beam, arms crossed. Long enough to know how this war really works. She nodded, as if the answer confirmed something she had already suspected. Then you understand that this war isn't about battles. It's about making them believe they've already won, right up until the moment they realize they've lost. Cooper exhaled a quiet chuckle. Sounds like you've been doing this for a while, too. Her eyes flicked to him, longer than the Empire would like to admit. Daniels studied her again, measuring her words. She wasn't just another resistance fighter. He had suspected it from the start. The way she carried herself, the way she had remained silent when captured, the way she had known exactly what to do when the cell doors opened. There was no fear in her, no hesitation, only purpose. Rodriguez watched her carefully. You were waiting for us. She didn't deny it. I was waiting for someone. The Empire's arrogance ensures that when they capture someone like me, it won't take long for the right people to come looking. Miller scoffed. And if we hadn't? Her expression didn't change. Then I would have made sure my capture cost them more than they were willing to pay. There was no bravado in her tone, no embellishment, just certainty. Daniels had worked with men who had given everything for this war, men who had fought knowing they would never see victory, only the chance to make the Empire bleed. He recognized that same fire in her. She wasn't just another resistance operative. She was something else. A quiet beep sounded from Daniel's wrist display. A transmission had come through, encrypted, untraceable, their signal from command. He glanced at the message. A single word. Proceed. The girl turned to him. Time to go. Daniels nodded. The mission was only beginning. The industrial district pulsed with artificial light, the rain-slick streets reflecting the amber glow of overhead security drones sweeping through the lower sectors. The squad moved in silence, slipping through the forgotten veins of the city where Imperial presence was thin. Daniels took point, eyes flicking between the shadows and his wrist display, monitoring the enemy's movements. The Empire was closing its net, but they were still looking in the wrong places. That wouldn't last. Cooper crouched beside a rusted support beam, his rifle tracking the distant hum of patrol units sweeping the adjacent sector. They've started rerouting assets, traffic flows shifting toward the outer districts. Rodriguez adjusted his earpiece, filtering through intercepted comms. They're scrambling, but they still think this was just a prison break. No chatter about us yet. Miller exhaled sharply. They'll figure it out soon enough. Daniels scanned the perimeter before gesturing forward. We move now. The moment they flag this sector, we lose our window. The girl followed without hesitation, her pace matching theirs with practiced ease. She didn't need instruction, didn't ask questions. She moved like someone accustomed to war, not the kind fought on battlefields, but the kind that left no records, no survivors, only whispers of what had happened. The squad crossed into the lower maintenance corridors, slipping through forgotten infrastructure beneath the city. Here, the Empire's reach was weaker. Automated systems had been left to decay, and the few patrols assigned to these sectors rarely bothered to check beyond their designated routes. The squad had spent months mapping these tunnels, learning their intricacies, their weaknesses. They weren't just escaping. They were maneuvering toward the next phase. Cooper adjusted his rifle strap. Command has our secondary package prepped. Rodriguez checked his data pad. Timing's tight, but it'll hold. Miller frowned. And if it doesn't? Daniels didn't break stride. Then we improvise. The girl finally spoke, her voice calm. What's the objective? Rodriguez smirked. You'll like this one. Daniels glanced at her. The Empire thinks you were just an asset they detained. They're wrong. You weren't captured. You positioned yourself. And now, they've given us a direct line into their operations center. She nodded, unsurprised. Then you already know what comes next. Miller tightened his grip on his weapon. We make them bleed. The squad moved deeper into the tunnels, navigating the labyrinth with the ease of men who had long since memorized every passage, every junction. The girl never faltered, her pace steady. She had known from the moment they extracted her that the real mission had yet to begin. Daniels held up a fist. The squad stopped. Above them, heavy boots echoed through the maintenance shafts. Imperial reinforcements were moving faster now, recalibrating their search patterns. They weren't searching for a prisoner anymore. They were searching for an enemy unit. Cooper watched the ceiling, his expression unreadable. They're moving to sector-wide lockdown. Rodriguez checked his feed. We have 15 minutes, maybe less, before they start cutting power to secondary access points. Daniels motioned forward. Then we hit them first. They reached the access point leading into the city security grid, a forgotten service in trance buried beneath decades of urban expansion. The Empire had relied on its own arrogance, believing its automated defenses were impenetrable. They weren't. Miller worked fast, setting the breach charges in a tight formation along the reinforced hatch. Rodriguez rerouted the surveillance feeds, buying them critical seconds before the alert could spread. Daniels checked his display. "We go loud in 3, 2. The charges detonated in a precise burst, sending the hatch flying inward. The squad moved as one, weapons raised, sweeping through the corridor beyond. Imperial technicians barely had time to register the intrusion before they were neutralized, their consoles now under squad control. Rodriguez took position, fingers flying over the controls. "We have 5 minutes before they reroute command. I'm pulling all available schematics now." The girl stepped forward, scanning the displays. "Prioritize weapon stockpiles, fleet movements, and high-value personnel." Daniels exchanged a look with Miller. She wasn't just here for the mission. She was already planning what came next. Cooper's rifle snapped up. "Incoming." Imperial enforcers flooded the adjacent corridors, weapons drawn, moving with trained precision. The squad didn't hesitate. Suppressed rounds cracked through the air, dropping the first wave before they had a chance to react. The Empire had numbers. The squad had experience. Miller reloaded. "They'll keep coming." Daniels nodded. "We don't need long." Rodriguez finished the last data transfer. "Done." The girl turned to Daniels. "Time to deliver the message." He activated the final command sequence. Throughout the city, Imperial communications faltered. Security protocols failed. Entire sectors went dark. The Empire had spent decades crafting an image of invulnerability. That illusion shattered in an instant. The girl stepped forward, her voice calm as she accessed the now compromised transmission system. The Empire had taken her prisoner, mocked her, dismissed her. Now, she would remind them why they feared the unseen war. Her words were few, but they carried the weight of something inevitable. The transmission ended. The squad moved. They were already gone before the Empire understood what had happened. Smoke curled through the shattered corridors of the security grid, the scent of scorched metal and ozone thick in the air. Alarms blared uselessly in the distance, their wailing tones swallowed by the deeper rumble of failing infrastructure. The Empire's control over Vortalis Prime had fractured in real time, entire sectors blinking offline as the squad's strike rippled through its network. They had done more than steal intelligence. They had left the Empire blind and bleeding. Daniels led the way through the underbelly of the city, his rifle angled low, but ready. The girl moved beside him, her expression unreadable, her focus absolute. She had not hesitated when she had spoken over the compromised transmission, her voice cutting through the Empire's vast network like a blade. She had given no speech, no threats, no demands. Just a statement, a reminder that the war they thought they controlled had already shifted beyond their grasp. Rodriguez kept scanning their surroundings, his sidearm tight in his grip. Comms are still dark on their end. They won't be able to coordinate for at least another half hour. Cooper exhaled sharply. That's 30 minutes longer than they can afford. Miller checked the rear, his gaze sharp. They'll hit back. Hard. Daniels nodded. They always do. They moved through the rusted corridors of the forgotten tunnels beneath the city, weaving past decayed infrastructure and abandoned machinery. This place had once been the foundation of Vortalis Prime's industrial might, long before the Empire had drained it dry. Now, it was nothing but a graveyard of forgotten ambition, a place the Empire had deemed beneath its notice. That had been its first mistake. Rodriguez halted at a junction, scanning his display. Our extraction set. Route's clean for now, but we'll need to move fast. The girl tilted her head slightly, listening beyond the hum of dying power systems. They've already adjusted their search patterns. Daniels met her gaze. You're sure? She nodded. They won't look for a battle. They'll look for an exit. Miller clenched his jaw. So we don't give them one. Daniels checked the data slate on his wrist, the last of Rodriguez's pulled files flickering across its cracked surface. The Empire's response had been pre-programmed, a rehearsed contingency designed for smaller insurrections, not this. They weren't prepared for the scale of disruption the squad had delivered. The city's security protocols were failing across multiple sectors, each system collapsing in on itself like a dying star. The Empire had built its rule on control, and now, in the span of a single operation, that control had been stripped away. Cooper adjusted his grip on his rifle. How long before they realized the transmission wasn't just a warning? Rodriguez smirked. If we did our job right? Right about now. Somewhere above, the deep tremor of detonation rolled through the Undercity. A secondary package had been triggered, a final parting gift embedded within the Empire's automated defenses. Entire blocks would be left in darkness, their access points collapsing into chaos. The squad didn't need to escape unnoticed. They just needed to ensure the Empire had no time to pursue. Daniels gestured forward. Move. They crossed into an abandoned freight tunnel, its walls lined with rusted transport rails and obsolete machinery. The Empire had stripped this place of purpose long ago, leaving it to rot beneath the surface of its gleaming capital. That neglect had made it the perfect ghost to hide within. Miller kept his weapon tight against his shoulder, scanning the darkness. I don't like how quiet it is. Cooper exhaled. Enjoy it while it lasts. Rodriguez tapped his earpiece, checking for any residual signals. No Imperial comms in range. They're still chasing shadows. The girl walked at the same pace as the squad, her movements precise, controlled. She had never faltered, never broken stride. Daniels had known hardened soldiers who had buckled under pressure, men who had hesitated when the mission demanded otherwise. She wasn't one of them. She moved like a specter of war, not bound by the weight of doubt or hesitation. She had understood, from the moment the first shot was fired, that victory was not about surviving. It was about ensuring the enemy didn't. Rodriguez slowed near the extraction point, his display flickering with an incoming ping. It's time. Daniels checked the perimeter. The Empire had not yet reached them, but that would change soon. They weren't running. They were setting the next stage. The girl turned to him. What happens next? Daniels studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the distant cityscape, where fire and smoke marked the Empire's unraveling grip. We give them something they can't control. Miller secured the final access point, cutting their trail before the Imperials could follow. The squad had done more than disappear. They had rewritten the battlefield in real time, shifting the Empire's focus away from where the real war would be fought. Cooper exhaled as the extraction signaled ready. They'll remember this one. Rodriguez smirked. That's the point. Daniels looked back at the girl, the one the Empire had mocked, dismissed, underestimated. They had called her a prisoner, a nobody, a loose end to be tied up. But she had never been any of those things. She had been the beginning of something far greater, something the Empire had feared but never truly understood. She held his gaze, the fire in her eyes unyielding. They'll come for me again. Daniels nodded. Let them. The city burned behind them, but the war was only beginning.